on Citizen TV. Let's take a look at what President Uhuru Kenyatta had to say yesterday about the state of the nation. He dismissed the opposition's call for a referendum, saying it is now time to build the nation after a prolonged electioneering period. Appearing in a public function for the first time since the Supreme Court affirmed his re-election, Kenyatta asked leaders to shun divisive politics and put their energies into building the nation. The president was flanked by his deputy William Ruto, spoke in Kirinyaga when he launched a 19 billion shilling dam project. Jackie Maribe now reports.
Kirinyaga County would be first to host President Kenyatta and his DP William Ruto since the Supreme Court validated their re-election. Development, their agenda here. But first, the political question, with Kenyatta breaking his silence on the opposition's call for a referendum.
Oh, sasa ni katiba, oh, sasa sijui ni nini, oh, sasa jamani ni katiba miaka mitano bado na sasa tayari tunasema tubadilishe tena. Hey, Wakenya wanataka tuhakikishe ya kwamba tumeweka ugali kwa meza. Watoto wao wamesoma. Hospitali tumejenga.
For the country to move forward, Kenyatta is of the view that the chapter on politicking needed to be closed.
Hatuwezi kuishi na kukula siasa. Wakati wa Afrika tuseme tumetosha.
Sasa nafasi ya mashindano na siasa imekwisha. Nafasi iliyoko sasa ni sisi wote kufanya kazi kwa ushirikiano.
Nakwambia siku hizi hata mimi nimechoka kuangalia TV. Ni ya nini? Hata kusoma gazeti. Kila saa, kila siasa. Sijui mtu anajiita analyst. Kama ulikuwa hii analyst hii kila siku. Na siasa una analyze nini? Au si tumechoka jameni?
The president extending an olive branch to those in the opposition to put an end to divisive politics and instead work together to build on development.
Sasa njooni tufanye kazi, tupangilie vile wa Kenya watafaidi. Na tuendelee mbele.
Ni nafasi yetu sasa ya kujenga daraja za urafiki, undugu, umoja katika kazi ya kupeleka taifa letu mbele kwa maendeleo.
A key plank of that development agenda in the second term being food security, as they launched the 19 billion shilling Thifa Dam project, financed through a joint partnership between the national government and their Japan counterparts through the Japan International Cooperation Agency.
Si tulisema kazi iendelee? Ndio rais mnaona amefika hapa kwa sababu ahadi ni deni.
Food security is critical to the Jubilee agenda. Food security shall be part and parcel of my agenda in my second term.
We have a deficit, a national deficit of almost 250,000 tons. Through irrigation, tutaweza kuzalisha na hakuna haja kutoa mchele kutoka Pakistan ama nchi nyingine tukikamilisha hii miradi tunafanya.
Pindi utakapomalizika, mradi huu utawawezesha wakulima kukuza mimea yao mara 2 kwa mwaka na kuboresha mavuno.
Japan itachangia shilingi bilioni 12 kwa kujenga irrigation dam na kadhalika, kwa kusaidia watu wa Kirinyaga kupanda michele. Sawa?
Only recently, Kenyatta banned the importation of rice with a view that self-sufficiency could be achieved. The dam, one of 57 such dams they plan to build, is expected to be completed in 45 months as it seeks to improve the agricultural sector of the area and open up jobs for 1,000 youth, both directly and indirectly. Meanwhile, plans for the swearing-in ceremony on Tuesday at the Kasarani Gymnasium are underway, with final touches being put in place as the Assumption of Office Committee made sure everything is in tip-top shape.
Just days to his swearing-in and in his first public appearance in a public function, the president and his DP as well now asking all leaders to put behind politics of rhetoric and division, saying now it is time to get down to work. Jackie Maribe, Citizen TV in Kirinyaga County.
Well, shortly I'll also be telling you what the National Super Alliance is up to, but I want to get a quick reaction now from my guest in studio to that particular story. And George, I'll start with you. The president says enough of politics, enough of talk shows, enough of political analysts. Is it possible that after the kind of year we've had, the manner in which Kenyans have been divided, that into sharply opposing factions, that you can quickly just say enough of politics and it ends like that?
Oh, we can't say that, Wahiga, because I think we still have a problem. We have half of Kenya that believes that they are not represented, and they still want to discuss this. How do we get out of this? So when when the president says that that is enough, you see, even when you talk development, development is still tied to politics. When you go to a place and say that I'm bringing this because of development, that is still, you're still playing politics. And right now, the situation in Kenya is that the country is polarized. We have people who feel that they belong to the government and they want to support the government. We have half of the country believes that we are not being represented in government. And this is what we are out here to address. We need to bring the government into account, tell the government this is where you're getting it wrong. So we cannot be stopped from doing that until such a point where we believe that everything now will be running smoothly, we all belong to the same nation. So I think the president there erred when he said that we should stop talking politics. We'll still talk politics until we are satisfied that we are now all well represented in this country.
Okay, Mary, are you from the same standpoint that you can never say enough of politics?
Well, we're a very politicized country. Everything in Kenya falls under that, politics, But the president does have a point. A lot of people are exhausted because everything has been them versus us. The messaging has been very negative, and people, like George has said, are highly polarized. However, I do believe it's important for people to get sober discussions, sober opinions that are based on fact, and therefore it is important for us to continue with this discussion because we need to heal this country. We need to mend this country.
Okay.
We need to bring it together.
You'll allow me to interrupt you because
Yes.
we just want to get a quick shot. I'll come back to you, Mary, from Zimbabwe, where we know that in the next hour or so, the inauguration of former Vice President Emerson Mnangagwa will be taking place at a 60,000-seater stadium. The President of Zambia has arrived. We are now bringing you live images from the airport at Zimbabwe, where any minute now we expect the President of the Republic of Zambia to step out from the aeroplane there. Edgar Lungu, His Excellency Edgar Lungu, the President of the Republic of Zambia, expected any minute now, and those are images we'll continue to bring to you. We know that the live event from Zimbabwe, where the inauguration of former Vice President Emerson Mnangagwa, also known as or nicknamed the Crocodile, will be happening anytime from 11 o'clock Kenyan time, which is 10 o'clock Zimbabwean time. So a waiting game now for him to walk onto those or down those stairs and be received by those who are on hand. A transition that many hadn't thought would happen anytime soon. But nevertheless, what a week it has been for Zimbabweans, for the whole world. International media interrupting their regular programming to bring blow-by-blow accounts of everything that has been happening in Zimbabwe. First time that you've seen such global networks stopping what they're doing, focusing on their own nations to take a look at a positive story coming out of Africa and Zimbabwe, to be more specific. 37 years in power by former President Robert Mugabe. What do the next couple of years hold for this nation? Wait and see game is all we can say. We just have to wait and see what will happen. So Edgar Lungu is there. I'm sure Jacob Zuma, if he's not already there, will be arriving among others. Whatever we get, we will keep updating you at home. So you need to keep it Citizen TV. Mary, apologies for interrupting you. I'll come back and allow you to carry on shortly.
I'd just like to point out that Mnangagwa...
Go ahead, Mary.
I'd just like to point out that Mnangagwa was part of that Mugabe team, so I really don't see this as a transition. In fact, a lot of analysts would argue that it was about Grace Mugabe's move to take over power, and therefore you saw what you're seeing right now in Zimbabwe.
So is it appropriate for us to put a question mark at the end there? Fresh start?
I think it is appropriate. I think it is appropriate. We saw thousands of people take to the streets very peacefully, very happy. And a lot of messaging online has been that they're very glad that Grace Mugabe has left.
Okay. And you can see the sort of crowd that has shown up at the stadium with at least 30 minutes or so to go before the inauguration. This shows, you know, and some were even asking themselves, listen, if Mugabe won the last election with such a majority, I think 66% or something of the sort, why is that not represented here? Should that 66% not be protesting the exit of their leader? But what we're seeing is a majority was so happy with the news, dancing on the streets, and just by looking at that shot we saw from the stadium, clearly a lot of Zimbabweans excited about this transition, although you say it might not be.
Well, what you're looking at is a situation where the international community is very excited about this transition, if we're calling it a transition, or taking over power. And for the average Zimbabwean, this means the economy will be kick-started. Jobs will be available. They'll be able to go to the bank and withdraw more than just £30 or $30. These are people who have hope on their side, a little bit like Kenyans in 2002, 2003, when NARC Rainbow Coalition came into power. And Kenyans felt this is a new start, it's a fresh start, very, very positive thinking at the time. That's what we're seeing in Zimbabwe right now. It's a wait and see.
It's a wait, it definitely is a wait and see. And of course, the way in which the world is scrutinizing Zimbabwe is the way in which they'll follow up after the inauguration to see whether the promises that were delivered, Mnangagwa has spoken of, we are now in a full democracy. We have to wait and see. There's an election coming up. Will he be faithful to allow independent institutions to organize that election? He has about a year to prove to the world that he is the savior of Zimbabwe and not just a continuation of Robert Mugabe. I had also given you a chance just to weigh in on the discussion, an end to divisive politics. The president is calling for that, but some are saying not yet. We still want to talk about this, and I can give you a chance just to finish your thoughts.
And like I said earlier, I feel that we do need to have this discussion. Steve was pointing out that as Kenyans, we need to first take a deep breath and ask ourselves why we allow our leaders to dictate our actions. Can we not think for ourselves? Can we not question? Why is it that somebody will look at my last name and assume I lean in a certain direction? Why is it that a certain leader from a certain area will be deemed to be affiliated to a certain party? Those are some of the issues we need to address as Kenyans, because we can't, brush this aside. These are deep-rooted. We've seen little children go onto the streets and celebrate that their person has come into power. We need to address this, and if we don't, we're going to go back to the same monster in 2022.
5 years and counting. Steve?
I empathize with the president because in as much as he cares for the country moving forward, you can't move forward before you resolve some of the some of the outstanding issues. I think all of us agreed that the conclusion of the judicial process and the ultimate determination of the outcome of the presidential election, the validity of that outcome, only marks part of the resolution of the problems. There's a lot that is still outstanding which could not be addressed in the courts. The issues of inclusion, the issues of the right to equal participation in government, and the order of governance generally, and other issues that need to be addressed. So I think the president will not be able to get down to work before these issues are fully addressed. But most importantly, and I want to point out with tremendous respect the institution of the presidency, that Article 10 of the Constitution has now ordained a new technique to governance that now makes politics an inextricable component of governance. It says people must participate. The level of participation could be through these opinion shapers that grace your TV stations, could be through those people's assemblies, could be through the citizen oversight forums, could be through those people writing letters, petitions. All this is part of the design to hold the government accountable.
Okay.
Now, I think maybe what the president can focus on is how to tap into that. What is it that is coming from those panel discussions that may be beneficial? Because we have the liberty and the freedom of thought and expression, which people in government may be constrained to say, so if we position these people to watch, can you track what is happening at Citizen and other media houses, and is there anything beneficial coming out of that discussion? Sandra spoke eloquently about now demobilizing this militia.
Yes.
That's something that is beneficial to this government. And if somebody captured that for him and reframed it for him, the government could benefit from that.
Okay, I will have to interrupt you, Steve, at this time, because as you can see, we've now taken pictures live from Harare. I know I have to shock you to change your thinking, but any thoughts? You've been monitoring, of course, what's been happening in Zimbabwe. Just let me get your thoughts, and Sandra's as well.
Mr. Oigwa, for me, unlike the majority of Kenyans that reacted with excitement, For me, this, when I saw the host of Mugabe, I saw, first of all, an host of the Constitution. The Constitution has some certain controls on how power is managed and how power is transferred. This is a coup. Whether it's bloodless or violent-free or not, a coup is a coup, and this is what has, whether the people support it or not. And the problem is this. 2 lessons from Zimbabwe to Kenyans. One touches on these people in positions of leadership. That, listen, you may have the constitutional and legal mandate to govern, but if you don't use it well, people may be watching you govern with desperation. When will you ever leave? So that when you leave, whether through constitutional or legal means or not, they are still happy that you've left. But to the institutions of governance that now remain behind after Mugabe, you get the constitution, and Zimbabwe has a new constitution. Theirs is 2013, ours is 2010, and they learned a lot from Kenya. The constitution must give us predictability and certainty in the transfer of power. It shouldn't be open to the army to just imagine what gives the army the mandate to imagine that there's a crisis within the political class and then go and assume power or someone. It may be celebrated now, but let me tell you...
I think it's a bad precedent.
It's a bad example. I hope it doesn't happen elsewhere. There must be ways of strengthening key institutions of governance, such as parliament. Parliament cannot wait for the army to come and, you know, sort of oust Mugabe. Then now they start preparing an impeachment motion and then occasioning Mugabe's resignation. So Mugabe is not resigning because parliament was impeaching him. He's resigning because the army that he relied on to sustain his presidency has now turned his back on him.
Steve, there are two Zimbabweans, or a couple of Zimbabweans will be joining us. I hope that they'll see your point, because to them I think they're feeling like a fresh start for the nation. They don't care how it happened. They had given up.
Caution is the word, Vaiga, so that going forward for the whole of Africa, it can't be that it's our pride to have unconstitutional change of governments. However beneficial that may be, it should be something to look forward to, that even in Kenya we should reach that level. Let us strengthen the key institutions and let us give them the capacity to operate independently. That is why even here in Kenya we're saying that parliament, in as much as it's Jubilee controlled, but as an institution, you have been equipped to operate independently. A parliament that is impervious to executive manipulation, it will be a disservice to this country and to undermine the constitution if parliament voluntarily allowed itself to be manipulated by an external force, whether that force be the presidency or political party leaders who are not in parliament or in government. I think that would be the kind of approach that undermines the spirit of the constitution. I would have privileged if the Zimbabwean parliament, where were they all this time?
In the midst of all this.
Why couldn't they impeach Mugabe? Why did they have to wait? So I think this democracy in Zimbabwe is still very weak. And as Mary said, this is the elite bickering, changing themselves, not really a fresh start as we have seen. This is politics of succession managed by the elite, you know, and the people are there
and the end result
celebrating.
Will always be the same.
I hope after this they reflect deeply on what ails Zimbabwean democracy.
A Zimbabwean that we spoke to yesterday actually said, and Sandra, I can allow you to weigh in on this, that he hopes that the people who are out on the streets will carry on picketing until September 2018, until the election happens, because he feels that if they, after today's event, go home and wait for the elite to carry on with what they are doing, that the same issues that we've seen in Zimbabwe happening before will still carry on. I don't know what your thoughts are, even as you compare where Kenya is and of course what's happening in Zimbabwe today.
I think I don't want to call it a problem, but the observation I'm making is that we assume that there's a one-fit-all uniform as far as democracy in Africa is concerned. And this is also based on the fact that, one, we are a very diverse community with diverse systems, diverse structures, and so we cannot have one form of democracy for all the countries, given that even their history of formation is very different. So it's true, I've been hearing a lot of sentiments saying, oh, the guy should not be accepted because of ABCD. And for me, the statement that has been on my mind is we are taking Panadol for Zimbabweans' headache, which ideally, for me, that is what I'm seeing. Because if the images are anything to go by, they look very in charge of the process. However, whichever way we want to look at it, that is what they want, that is what they are going for. It might not seem right for us, but that is what they want. So ideally, my perception is that they're able to deal with it. If they're going to be holding elections come to 2018, they'll deal with it. If they find to a point they do not like the new leader that they have, they're going to deal with it. But what we should not do is to expect Zimbabwe to expect that one size fits all kind of democracy for each and every country. Let them deal with it the way they want it, for as long as the kind of damages that we see with the change of governments are not witnessed in Zimbabwe.
You should see the kind of smile Steve Ogola has on his face.
For him, it's constitution and law.
I don't think he totally agree with you. Let's listen a little bit to what is happening in that southern country. All focus today is on Zimbabwe.
Do we go for them, or we're already seeing the international community reaching out their hands and saying, let's re-engage for a better Zimbabwe tomorrow?
The international community has already started speaking. You know, in international relations, what is important when we are talking about states and their relations is the issue of recognition. Already, you know, we saw messages even during the struggle, the people's struggle, you know, which happened in a week, the people's struggle. We saw Britain already saying that Zimbabwe is a jewel of Africa, you know, supporting the will of the people. We saw America, you know, also supporting the people. South Africa, Botswana, of note, really also supported the people. That is commendable. So already, also China, Russia, they spoke their minds. They are supporting the will of the people. This is very important. But also we are proud of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. You know, it stood by the international humanitarian law. You know, that is very important. Supporting peace and security in the country. You know, they have a constitutional mandate to guarantee peace and security of the country. And most importantly, what we saw them implementing is human security, you know, which is a core, their core mandate is also human security. Of course, they have traditional roles, you know, where they defend the country in terms of its borders. But what we saw being implemented this time was human security. That is very important. You know, human security, the defense forces also get involved even in the economic welfare of the people. Because when the people are unstable in terms of economic welfare, there is instability. So defense forces, you know, lifted the flag high of Zimbabwe to restore the legacy of this country. The legacy which was brought in as a result of the liberation struggle. So this is what we are witnessing again.
You bring up the role that the defense forces had in this new transition, in this new dawn, in this new era. How important are the defense forces to a nation such as Zimbabwe, seeing exactly the fact that the people are happy with what the defense forces have done in terms of their interventions?
The defense forces did what they are supposed to do in terms of the constitution. You know, they are supposed to be the pulse of the nation in terms of human and security, guaranteeing the nation, you know, the nation must live peacefully. There must be tranquility. There must be development. There must be freedom of conscience, freedom of movement. You know, this is what the security forces have guaranteed. You know, people had become stagnant, you know, in terms of how they think. You know, they were just now following, you know, what a few people were thinking as a result of coercion, as a result of intimidation. It is good to wake up in a Zimbabwe where people can express themselves freely. You know, this comes as a surprise to many people, because they always think that the security forces, they are there to use their guns and bullets. But the security forces are there to guarantee the Constitution itself, the values of the Constitution, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, you know, just the peace and tranquility of the whole country, even the adherence to the democratic principles. But when that is threatened, the security forces, they come in, and they did even what is expected.
Well, we have changed our perspective now here, all focus on Zimbabwe, and we even changed our panel to reflect that. Joining me in studio now, let me start from the far right there, Reginald Kadzutu, an economy and strategy analyst based here in Kenya. but from Zimbabwe, as you can tell by the flag on around his neck. Welcome to the program, Reginald.
Thank you, Aiga.
Right, and just here close to me, Marjorie Maimba, a businesswoman based in Kenya, also from Zimbabwe. Welcome to the program as well.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure both of you are watching a little bit about what we here in studio are trying to discuss about your nation, but of course you are better placed to talk a little bit about what's happening today. First things first, and I'll start with you, Reginald. How are you feeling to be alive on the day when this transition is happening, or have you now gotten over the euphoria and are you now asking yourself the tough questions of what next?
I actually wish I was in Harare, just to enjoy the atmosphere, to enjoy an inauguration ceremony, so to speak. Euphoria, I think I never reached the point of euphoria. And I think as we
You were not one of those who went online to write how you're crying. You know, I saw a lot of social media messages.
No. I wasn't going to cry because we still need to continue the fight. As I said, ZANU-PF is a system. The system is still intact. We just remove the person who was personifying the system. Mnangagwa is pretty much part of the system. So we will celebrate this psychological victory. Psychologically, we feel liberated. But politically and socially, I don't think the system will actually allow us those freedoms. But I guess people change. It's a wait-and-see game.
It's a wait-and-see game. Marjorie, I can ask you the same question. How are you feeling?
I feel great. This is a beautiful day for Zimbabwe. It's something new, something different, something that has never happened in 37 years, and I'm very excited.
Reginald, are you concerned with the reports that we had that former President Robert Mugabe, his wife, were granted amnesty as part of a deal? Of course, it's not fully confirmed, but should it be true, does that worry you? They will not pay for any sins that they may have committed in those 37 years or so?
It depends on which side you look at it from. If you look at the side of punish them for whatever they did in those 37 years, then the question is, the next person who comes in, will that punishment stop them from doing the same thing for the fear of the punishment?
That's a good question.
Or will they cling on to power in fear of that punishment of the day they leave power? For any sins that they have committed, yes, they should be held account, especially the wife. He doesn't have presidential immunity. The president does have immunity. But now, if you decide to punish, for example...
Although we know that she did get some immunity, especially after what happened in South Africa. We heard that's how she got out.
It's called Africanism, not constitutionalism. They followed the African traditions, not the laws of the land. But take this scenario where you put President Mugabe in the dock. How much beans will he spill on the current coming in president? So I don't think they will do that, not because they don't want to do that, but just to protect themselves.
He knows too much.
General Chiwenga, Mnangagwa have been part of ZANU-PF for the last 37 years. Everything Mugabe did, they were part of it. Some of it, they masterminded it. So they will definitely not try to prosecute Mugabe for anything, because it will be literally convicting themselves.
Okay, Mary and Steve, I'm coming to you shortly, but Marjorie, what are you hoping to hear from Mnangagwa this morning in his speech?
I think the rhetoric needs to change. It needs to change from, he needs to realize that he's no longer the leader of a certain party or faction. He is now a national leader. I think his message needs to transcend different divides. He needs to transcend partisan lines. And whatever his rhetoric was in the past needs to change from today going forward.
So you expect to see, you hope to see a different man,
definitely,
from the one that has
yes.
been in the higher echelons of ZANU-PF for a very long time. Mary, you had some thoughts about what's happening in Zimbabwe. Now that we have some sort of representation here, I can give you a chance to share your thoughts with them.
Yes, as I pointed out earlier, for me this is very reminiscent of Kenya 2002 going into 2003. We have deposed a president who's been in power for a couple of years, and a new coalition is coming into power, and the NARC Rainbow Coalition. But then once that happened, the euphoria was over, then reality struck. And like Steve had pointed out, constitutionalism comes into play. There are certain rules and regulations that must be followed. And if the system is still rotten, whoever you do bring in still adheres to that rotten system.
Okay, and Steve?
I think out of decency, if Zimbabweans are celebrating, who are we not to celebrate with them? So first I share the joy, because I think people may have felt fatigued just seeing the same face over and over again. But beyond the celebration, in terms of what is called comparative constitutional law issues, Africa has a problem. Zimbabwe surely does have a serious problem. One, because what has happened is...
Our viewers may not see this, but Marjorie is nodding quite vigorously.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
She agrees with you.
And part of that problem, we have also domesticated it here in Kenya. Leaders manipulating the constitution to stay on power, in power. You see, the nature of the nature of a republican form of government is that you serve for a limited period of time. That, world over, that is the acceptable format. You serve for a limited period of time because power corrupts, absolute power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The longer you cling into power, the more likely you are susceptible to manipulate that power for your own personal benefit. So that's why they say, if you choose to be in a democratic state, you must serve for a definite period of time. 37 years is not definite, and Mugabe was not going. So whatever was happening in the Zimbabwean constitutional framework that allowed him to continue staying on, just like in Uganda, I think whatever manipulation of the constitution to allow you to constitutionally or legally remain in power eventually can catch up with you. Now you see, people are also innovating outside the constitution. The army, because of the elite bickering, the army has innovated outside the constitution because you cannot have a constitutional framework that says if you want to have a change of guard, you oust the president. There must be a predictable pathway predicated in the constitution. What the army did is outside the constitution, but it's a welcome consequence of the people who have also manipulated the constitution. It's a lesson for Kenyans also, for Uganda.
Marjorie might agree with you, but Reginald disagrees. Reginald, why are you nodding your head? By saying no.
Just a bit of background on what happened in Zimbabwe. If you notice, I think lack of correct leadership in the opposition led to Mugabe staying longer. The constitution they defeated had the two-term clause, and Mugabe would not have been able to run past 2008. So they defeated a constitution that actually has a two-term clause, which Mugabe would not have gone past 2008. When they finally got the new constitution, it had a 2-year term, but not retrospective. So this time, this last election that Mugabe was going in was actually going to be his last election. So when the military came in, the military was not just because Mugabe was refusing to go, but they realized as he goes into his last term, he has positioned his wife to take over for another 10 years. And his wife may not be part of the system. So the military was not there to come and restore constitutionalism as they kept on battering us on TV for the last 1 week to say we're doing this in the constitution, doing this in the constitution. They were literally just disposing of Mugabe to make sure that whoever comes in, their system continues. Because after 2018, you could not have run according to the constitution.
Okay.
And if you notice, even the way they did it, the military themselves, they forced him to resign as per the constitution. They didn't put a gun and say, get out, we are putting in someone new. He actually had to write a resignation letter, send it to parliament, read in parliament. They tried to impeach him and stuff like that. But the real crux about it actually was a ZANU-PF affair to make sure that when Mugabe finishes his term, it's not his wife who's going to take over.
My goodness. Mary, yes, I need to interrupt you, Steve, because we're really out of time. Mary, I need to get a comment from you. Mnangagwa in the next hour or so will give his speech. From this side of the continent, what do you hope to hear as you respond to him briefly?
I'm really glad that Reginald has brought up the issue of Grace Mugabe, because I did point it out. Us from the outside are looking in, and we noticed over the past couple of weeks, months, Grace has been positioning herself to take over. Mugabe is old, he's ailing. How many more years does he have? But the question now was, you have a ZANU-PF system that wants to continue as is, and they need to take out that one element that does not fit in to that system. And I'm very glad Reginald has pointed that out.
And even as they manage to do that, your hope from Mnangagwa in terms of what he'll say?
I'm hoping that Mnangagwa, because he's getting now a lot of international support insofar as what has happened, will actually change the system. That we will see economic reform in the country.
Can he change the system that he's a part of, that put him there? Can you bite the hand that feeds you?
Miracles can occur, and I'm hoping, like Zimbabwe, we want to see positive change. And if the economy can be picked and it can kickstart and people can get jobs and we can see a change in the economy, I'm happy.
You're
I'm really happy.
Okay.
Yes.
Steve, I'll give you a chance to respond after the break. We need to take a very short break. You're watching Citizen Extra live on Citizen TV. I'm coming to you, Steve. Gentleman's promise. We are monitoring closely what is happening in Zimbabwe. You need to keep it Citizen, and we'll continue looking at what's happening there. People streaming in. A very exciting day for the nation. Reginald, one of our guests here in the studio, saying he wishes he was back home to be taking in the sights and sounds in person, not on TV. But nevertheless, the best he can do today is join us here in studio. We take a quick break. We will be right back.